Sometimes something seems morally right, but in reality it leads to disaster. Can security and success be guaranteed for centuries? This text was banned, accused of being a handbook for demons and a guide for tyrants. It was said to corrupt those who read it, turning them into power-hungry ambitionists. We're talking about The Prince, written by the Italian diplomat and thinker Niccolò Machiavelli, known not only for his sharp mind but also for his unique style. This political work is a harsh critique of human nature and serves as a manual for rulers who want to maintain control over their people. Machiavelli aimed to reveal the real mechanics of politics and power. Today we'll explore the lessons of this book, uncovering advice for future leaders and for our everyday lives. We'll see why virtuous people often fail in government, why cruelty can sometimes be useful, and how morality is often less present than we believe. It's important to highlight that this book was written for princes, aristocrats ruling small states, and not for those in democratic systems. Also, this is an analysis of Machiavelli's ideas, not an endorsement. But why did The Prince get such a dark reputation? That's the first question we'll address, along with the first Machiavellian lesson for everyone. Abandon idealism. The moralistic fallacy is a common error in human thinking. Often, we believe the world should work according to our values, and when something doesn't meet those expectations, we're shocked. If you've ever wondered how someone could behave so wrongly, you've been a victim of this fallacy. Machiavelli insists that the real world is full of cruel, deceitful, and selfish behaviors, and it's necessary to accept this reality. He wants to take the blinders off our eyes and show us the world as it really is, or at least as he sees it. Before Machiavelli, many works about governance focused on virtues and qualities that good leaders or citizens should have. Aristotle's Politics, for example, extensively discusses how virtuous governments should be and how to promote social welfare. However, Machiavelli is not interested in those topics. The goal of The Prince is simple: to teach rulers how to gain and keep power. For him, the big problem with moral theories is that they ignore an uncomfortable truth. People, most of the time, are not virtuous. Machiavelli doesn't pass judgment. He only states what he considers an inevitable fact. People are selfish, disloyal, and prioritize their own interests. They will do whatever it takes to achieve their goals, moral or not, justifying their actions with ethical excuses afterward. In this context, a ruler who cares only about moral integrity will be devoured by harsh reality and lose power. Machiavelli's view is clear. Being a good person does not guarantee a stable and secure government. Sometimes, for both the leader and the governed, stability and security are much more valuable than ethical virtues. He lived in a time of great turmoil in Italy, where city-states rose and fell quickly, governments collapsed, and massacres were common. His experience taught him that it is better to have a ruthless ruler who protects the state than a virtuous but easily manipulated leader who would leave his people vulnerable to invasion and destruction. His first major lesson is clear: we must abandon idealistic illusions about human nature. For Machiavelli, people are dangerous, selfish creatures without morals, willing to betray even their loved ones if it gives them an advantage. He doesn't deny that virtuous individuals exist. In fact, he advises keeping them close if possible. But it's safer to assume the worst about people and be pleasantly surprised than to be overly optimistic and end up betrayed. This pessimistic view colors much of his advice. Among his best-known recommendations is that rulers should break promises and alliances when necessary, because their allies would do the same if it suited them. He also maintains that fear is a fundamental tool to maintain control over subjects in other states. Love and loyalty are unstable feelings, while fear is long-lasting and effective for control. He even suggests it is more important to appear good than actually be good, because most people pretend virtue and expect the same from others. This perspective contributed to Machiavelli's reputation as an unethical manipulator willing to sacrifice honesty and morality to achieve his goals, regardless of the harm caused. And there is some truth in that. He recommends morally questionable behaviors, but it's essential to understand the reason behind his suggestions. For Machiavelli, politics is a tough game, and whoever clings too much to virtue and refuses to make hard decisions will be replaced by someone even more ruthless. In the brutal context of Renaissance Italy, it was a matter of survival or death. Although my view of human nature is more optimistic than Machiavelli's, I can't deny there is truth in his observations. There will always be people willing to do whatever it takes to get what they want. Being aware of this prepares us to face them with firmness, even with toughness if necessary. We might not have to hang anyone from the city walls, but there will be times when we must temporarily suspend our morality for a greater good. It's up to you to decide when and how often those situations arise, when morality must give way to convenience. While you reflect on this ethical dilemma, let's turn to the quality Machiavelli values most in a ruler, a trait he considers superior to all others. There is a reason Machiavelli is often portrayed as someone who aspires to authoritarianism, despite having spent much of his life in diplomatic work in his hometown, Florence. He values power and ability above all else. Although this admiration could be seen as cold-hearted, his view of power has more nuance than it seems. Machiavelli highlights an essential and often overlooked truth. Without power, you can achieve nothing, no matter how pure your character. Without the capacity to act, your positive impact on the world will be almost zero. Years later, this point would be reinforced by Friedrich Nietzsche, but its essence can already be sensed in Machiavelli's thought. For Machiavelli, the main goal of a ruler must be personal power. This doesn't mean getting rich or exploiting subjects, but prioritizing the security and stability of the state. There's no point in winning the people's love if the government is fragile and vulnerable. That's why Machiavelli defends that the ruler strengthen his military forces with his own citizens, not with mercenaries who abandon the battlefield or switch sides if offered more. What is the ultimate purpose of that power? It's not control for control's sake, but to ensure self-sufficiency both for the leader and the state. In his view, any alliance or treaty can collapse at the first sign of weakness, so a ruler cannot depend on anyone to survive. Self-sufficiency, besides earning respect and fear from neighboring states, also gains admiration and loyalty from subjects. This concept applies not only to politics, but also to our personal lives. Philosophers like Seneca advise people to seek happiness within themselves, rather than relying on external factors. Seneca proposed giving up material goods and isolating oneself in nature to prove that inner peace doesn't depend on wealth or relationships, which generates not only external respect, but also self-respect, one of the greatest goods a person can have. In the end, we can ignore the contempt of others, but we cannot escape the inner voice that judges us when we fail to respect ourselves. Whether you are a Renaissance prince or a young person today, Machiavelli's advice remains relevant. Seek your independence from external influences, whether by force or self-control. However, one of his most controversial recommendations is that rulers should sometimes use cruelty to maintain power, and that will be our next topic. When you think of a cruel ruler, what comes to mind? Maybe a ruthless dictator who hoards wealth at the expense of his people, or someone who commits atrocities exploiting an oppressed class. But for Machiavelli, well-applied cruelty is not that. It's a tool to preserve stability and security. He claims it's better to be feared than loved, because love is unstable and fickle, but fear lasts. But this doesn't mean a ruler must be a heartless tyrant. Cruelty should only be used when necessary and in moderation, to prevent subjects from rebelling and threatening social order. Strategic cruelty generates respect and forces citizens to obey, while excessive leniency can cause the ruler to lose authority and gradually lose control. What Machiavelli proposes is calculated cruelty, swift and decisive, to eliminate threats and avoid greater suffering in the long term. This harsh idea makes sense in a world where security depends on the firmness of the ruler. Nowadays, although physical cruelty or oppression is unjustifiable, we can acknowledge that firmness, clear boundaries, and just authority are essential to maintaining order in any context. In summary, the Prince unveils real, raw politics without illusions, inviting reflection on the complex relationship between ethics, power, and survival. Its influence has been deep and lasting, teaching us that understanding history and the present requires more than aspiring to ideal morality. We must accept the shadows that come with power. Do you know what annoys me? Feeling lonely and not having anyone to talk to. So, if you like philosophy, I invite you to be part of the channel and be part of our community. We are always exploring new ideas, questioning concepts, and delving into issues that challenge the way we see the world. Every subscription makes a huge difference and helps keep these philosophical conversations alive.